Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 471, an intro to the fear of Elohim, part 1. How the fear of Elohim empowers you to turn away and depart from evil. The podcast objectives are reveal why the fear of Elohim is a top priority in your quest, provide a definition for the fear of Elohim, and analyze how faith, obedience, and virtue are related to the fear of Elohim. Walking in the fear of Elohim. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 318 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we analyzed how fear and distress have gripped our nation in these last days and how they are preventing many from walking in the fear of Elohim. From now, we must analyze how we can overcome fear and distress by walking in the fear of Elohim. In doing so, you will find that the fear of Elohim not only guards your heart, but it also guards your mind. Let's get started. Now, as I have mentioned beforehand in prior podcasts, the focal power of the Ruach is virtue. Ergo, as the fear of Elohim is the primary application of virtue, it is also a focal power of the Spirit, and a crucial one at that. For where there is no reverential fear, there can be no virtue. You can see this by observing the image to the left. To wit, reverential fear is a degree of holiness which connects virtue to knowledge. Trust me, this is a very big deal. To wit, the fear of Elohim, A, empowers us to walk in the focal power of the Ruach, and B, it empowers us to ascend to the level of knowledge, i.e., the level where we begin to receive the knowledge of the will of Elohim. Now, this is crucial because we cannot be saved without knowledge. For look, listen, it has been written, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And thus, we conclude the following. What you don't know can kill you. And if you continue in a path void of knowledge, it will bring you to great destruction. And the only way to avoid this path is by walking in the fear of Elohim. Not only this, but the fear of Elohim is the second major node of transformation we experience in our quest. And if you recall, transformation is the critical degree of obedience. Ergo, every primary degree of holiness following obedience is a prominent node of transformation. Ergo, the fear of Elohim is a second priority in your quest. And yet, because it is an extension of virtue, it is in effect a top priority. To wit, after we have transformed ourselves into virtuous men and women, the next thing Yahuwah wants us to do is sure. To wit, he wants us to transform ourselves into men and women who fear him always and in all ways. Therefore, as we analyze the fear of Elohim in all its degrees, you should remember that it, combined with virtue, is a top priority in this quest. And everything I share with you on this topic is designed to confirm this matter. to turn away and depart from evil. Now, in progressing this analysis on the fear of Elohim, I will provide a definition for the fear of Elohim to ensure we are considering this degree of holiness from a uniform spiritual perspective. By definition, the fear of Elohim is reverential awe of Elohim based upon appreciation and a fundamental understanding of who he is. This admiration causes you to have complete faith in him by your continued obedience to his will. Now, this definition clearly reveals that the fear of Elohim causes us to have complete faith in Elohim, which is validated by our continued obedience to his will. The key word here is continued, which reveals the following. Our continued obedience to the will of Elohim is the primary requirement for unlocking the fear of Elohim. We know this because the fear of Elohim is not only the primary application of virtue, but it is also the primary application of obedience. We know this because the fear of Elohim is designed to keep us from transacting sin. And where there is obedience, there can be no transaction of sin. Now, Exodus 20:20 is revealing, and Moshe said to the people, "Do not fear, for Elohim has come to prove you, and in order that his fear be before you, so that you do not sin." Proverb 3:7, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear Yahuwah and turn away from evil. Proverb 16:6, by mercy and truth, crookedness is purged, and by the fear of Yahuwah, men turn away from evil. Proverb 14:27, the fear of Yahuwah is a fountain of life, to turn away from the snares of death. Now, these verses make a clear connection between the fear of Elohim and the first major milestone we experience in our quest. That is, our victory over our sinful nature and the elimination of the sins of commission from our lives. We know this to be true for two primary reasons. First and foremost, every sin of commission evolves from your sinful nature, to wit, a chief example of cause and effect in our quest. Get this. If you retain your sinful nature, then you will commit illicit acts of sin. Ergo, your sinful nature is the cause, and the sin of commission is the effect. Now, this brings us to reason number two. Vis-a-vis, the scriptures make a clear distinction between the fear of Elohim and the power to A, turn away from evil, and B, to depart from evil. That is, to walk in the other direction, putting as much distance between you and the evil as possible. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, this is huge. This is very huge. Just think about it. We have unlocked the powers of 12 degrees of perfection, vis-a-vis all the degrees of virtue, obedience, and faith. And yet, until now, we have not gained the accumulative power to turn away and depart from evil. We're on our way and we're getting very close, but we are not there yet. And this, my friends, is why the fear of Elohim is so crucial and so vital in your quest. For the fear of Elohim is an accumulation of all the powers and purpose of virtue, obedience, and faith, which is why you are able to turn away and depart from evil at this juncture and not before. Now, this brings us to a key revelation that I advise you to bookmark and always remember. Every degree, from faith to the fear of Elohim, is designed to work together as a singular degree of power to enable you to turn away from every form of evil and depart so that you do not sin. My dear friends, this is the power and the purpose of the fear of Elohim. For look, listen, it has been written, Elohim has come to prove you, and in order that his fear be before you, so that you do not sin. Notwithstanding, here is a thing you must always remember vis-a-vis this game-changing interval of holiness can only be accessed by the channels of virtue, obedience, and faith. Ergo, if you have not unlocked the power of these three, you will never unlock the power of the fear of Elohim. Where virtue can flourish. Now, the link between faith and the fear of Elohim is sure. To wit, you will never truly respect someone you don't have faith in. Why? It's because they are unreliable. And where there is no reliance, there can be no faith. Facts. Now, as you would expect, the link between obedience and the fear of Elohim is also sure. To wit, you will never obey someone who you do not respect as an authority. Here is why. Obedience is contingent to authority, and authority is contingent to respect. Ergo, where there is no respect, there can be no obedience. And where there is no obedience, there can be no respect. Facts again. Now, this speaks to the validation model of perfection, which serves as a checks and balances on every sequence within the pinnacle of holiness. Trust me, besides the scriptural witnesses, there are hundreds of validations within the linear model of holiness. And as it pertains to the fear of Elohim, the primary validation lies within virtue. Remember, the fear of Elohim is the primary application of virtue, and they are adjacent degrees within the linear model of holiness. Along these lines, and as you have learned in the most recent series, virtue is the focal power of the Ruach of Elohim. As such, virtue is designed to deal a death blow to your sinful nature. Here is how. Virtue eliminates the spiritual strongholds of dishonesty and unrighteousness, vis-a-vis two of the primary drivers of every illicit act of sin. In doing so, virtue eliminates our degrees of defilement, for it has already eliminated the source, vis-a-vis dishonesty and unrighteousness. And this, my friends, is where the fear of Elohim comes in. To wit, the fear of Elohim, as the primary application of virtue, creates an environment within your heart where all the degrees of virtue can flourish, namely honesty, righteousness, and purification. Not only this, but this is also how the fear of Elohim empowers you to turn away and depart from evil. Listen to me. It is impossible for you to pursue evil if your heart is filled with honesty, righteousness, and purity, i.e., the 3 degrees of virtue. And that, my friends, is where you want to be. This is how you will overcome your sinful nature, while the transgressors in Jacob cry and complain and make every excuse as to why they can't stop sinning. Remember, we can do all things through Yahushua Messiah, and That includes our victory over every degree of lawlessness by following a path where we cannot lose, but where we are always winning. The only question is, are you willing to put in the work to get the job done? Are you willing to put yourself to the test? And are you willing to complete the second half of heart regulation so you can reign over sin and achieve the first major milestone in your quest? Now, if you answered with a resounding yes, that's good. All you have to do is stay with me, and I'll show you how you can unlock many powers and accomplish the greater works our master said we would. Selah. Now, here is the final word. The desire of Elohim is very clear that our hearts should be governed by his fear. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, although many will scarcely consider it, the primary purpose of the fear of Elohim is very clear, and I covered it all throughout this podcast. To wit, the fear of Elohim is designed to empower us to turn away from the pool that is associated with all evil, and having overcome said pool, we depart and we remain within the path of righteousness. This proves that the fear of Elohim has nothing to do with the vain lip service of rebels and transgressors who offer petty and pathetic praise to the Most High, which he is not receiving. For although they are willing to esteem him with their mouths, their hearts are not believing. Heretofore, I recommend, if you truly desire to fear Elohim, you should know that Yahuwah is not really interested in anything you have to say. Quite the contrary, he is primarily interested in what you are going to do. When the enemy throws the kitchen sink at you in order to pull you out of this narrow way. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on the word you have heard today. And as always, ask the Father to reveal the truth to you. For the children of Elohim live by conviction. And if he has not convicted you, or if you had not heard him concerning these matters, you should pray until you do. Today, I want you to meditate on the word I have shared. Specifically, I want you to meditate on the primary purpose of the fear of Elohim and how you will never obtain this focal power of his Ruach if you don't gain the victory over sin. In doing so, I want you to remember that all the powers you have unlocked thus far have prepared you for this moment. This is why we spent the first 9 months of this exposition of lawlessness revealing how you can unlock the powers of faith, obedience, and virtue. Trust me, if you are not operating in these powers of the Ruach and reigning over contempt, disobedience, and doubt, you will never obtain the fear of Elohim, and you will fail to overcome your sinful nature, and you will not reverse the curse of our captivity. Therefore, I want you to examine yourself and ensure that you are operating in all the degrees of virtue, obedience, and faith. If you are, you will find unlocking the fear of Elohim is a natural progression, and you will add one more trophy to your collection when you knock off the spirit of prejudice. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 471, an intro to the fear of Elohim, part 1. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 472, an intro to the fear of Elohim, part 2. I will post this podcast on Friday, May 16th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the spirit of Elohim, continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.